Welcome to Leaving Crazy Town with Finn and
Sarah.
Sarah. We're on the road again.
On the road.
Sarah,
out of
what's
Crazy Town, we hope.
Yeah, out of Crazy Town for sure. For this moment, anyway. Sarah, what's the tool this week?
All right, the tool of this week is going to be identifying your feelings. I know, and don't stick your finger in your throat. Did you just do that?
Yes.
I know we always do that.
I did this.
Because what we're discussing in group this week is, and what the email was about, is about checking out. And part of checking out, which is a coping skill, I mean, it can start with a coping skill and it can lead all the way to addiction, is the lack of ability of knowing kind of what's happening for you at the time and trying to identify what's going on underneath. Because we were just discussing this, is that if you don't identify what's going on at the time that you're checking out, it doesn't go anywhere. It's still there. And it's like, say, a resentment. And then time passes and then something else happens and another resentment. And I've talked about in the book, and we've talked about on the channel, what happens when accumulated grief, sorrow, resentment, anger, sadness, whatever, it does affect our level of aliveness on the planet. And that's really a big part of the need and why we suggest to identify your feeling states, because they get repressed and they affect our level of joy in the world. So
you just reminded me of something.
Yeah.
When I first went through the steps, I felt really good. I did 6 and 7, and I'm like, look at me, no defects of character. And about 2 weeks later, I came back down to earth, and somebody did something, and I felt the emotional response. I was mad, and I thought I had failed, but I was like, oh, I'm going to be loving and kind, and love and tolerance is our code. So I brushed the feelings aside. Beautiful. And I did it again, and I did it again. Not with that one person, with everybody. I kept thinking that I wasn't supposed to feel.
Yes.
I didn't separate like how I act with how I feel, and that feelings are natural. And I came to the place where I was pretty upset. I was pretty depressed, right. And I didn't want to tell anyone because I thought I had done something wrong. But it was all avoiding how I was feeling. That's
right. Denying, repressing, avoiding feelings, it has an impact on us. It's a great example. We do the 4th step and the 5th step and 6 and 7, and we start thinking, oh, I'm not going to get mad again. And that's just ridiculous, because part of being human is having feelings. We experience fear, anger, sadness, joy, resentment, whatever.
It's my favorite part of being human.
But we have to learn to pause, which is another tool. I think especially around uncomfortable feelings, pausing helps to not repress or avoid. If we just stop for a second and say to ourselves, geez, what's happening for me right now? And I'm going to give an example, and then Finn's going to give an example. I did write in the email about the ice cream episode, and that was an example of really not being able to identify my feelings till later. But in the last week, I'm moving, and a lot of people are coming by and picking up furniture. And my son's bed frame was being loaded into a pickup truck. And I literally had this stabbing experience in my chest. And like Laura was talking about last week, a lot of times I'll feel it in my body first, feeling like I was losing my breath. My eyes got watery, like I was just saying. And I realized I was just experiencing this huge wave of grief about this transition I'm having. I'm selling my house. My son's in love for the first time, and he hasn't been around at all. So feeling like I'm losing him, and just this grief. And, I allowed myself to get tearful. I allowed myself to feel it. Later on in the day, there was a bunch of people around, so I didn't break down sobbing, but I felt my tears. And later on, I did have some moments where I just let myself cry. So it's an example of really trying to identify what I'm feeling, rather than watching the stuff be loaded in the truck and me suddenly getting busy or starting to chat or make a joke, because that grief, I want that to move through me so I can feel present, I can feel alive, I don't want to feel repressed, etc. Okay, did you have an example too of last week?
Yeah, I don't know if it was last week, but it was actually today that I was driving up here, and going to go for a walk with the woman that I've been talking to, and I was feeling a lot of joy. I'm gonna come make videos with Sarah, we're gonna have breakfast, I'm meeting someone, it's exciting, it's a new chapter in my life. And while I was thinking about that, all of a sudden this huge wave of grief and missing my wife came up. And for me, what happens with my feelings a lot is I do go to other things, but what happens very quickly in a scenario where I can't get away, like I'm in a car, is I start telling myself what that feeling means. And
figure it out.
Yeah, I go right into the head, and I'm like, all right, it's too soon. You shouldn't be going to meet anybody. Da, da, da. When the truth is, whenever I experience joy, I miss my wife because we had so much fun together. And I remember her, and it's not a bad thing, and I can allow the grief to come up and cry. Like, yeah, I miss her. I wish she was here. I wish she was sharing in my joy. Just like when my mom died, and I bought a house, and I went to law school. I wanted to tell my mom,
right?
You know, and it's just interesting how I get intellectual immediately. I start analyzing the situation, and that's how I remove myself from the feeling instead of just having a feeling and letting it come up. I want to create a whole story around it.
Right. So we are encouraging people to just start to notice when you might be having a feeling. And I know it sounds so elementary, but I gotta tell you guys that addicts and many, many, many human beings resist the experience of feelings, which sounds crazy because that's what makes us feel alive. So especially being in recovery, we want to start to get into practice, especially for some of you on the group that maybe aren't in touch with that stuff right now. No, it's not easy to start experiencing feelings, especially if they might be painful.
I don't know about you. I have a hard time when someone else is having a feeling, never mind myself.
Yeah. That's part of the code crazy dance as well. You know, someone else is having a feeling and we need to make it okay for them.
But we can recognize the feeling we're having about their feeling.
That'll be another episode. Because now I want to talk for 10 minutes about that, but we're not going to do that.
It's getting too long.
And it's getting too long. So pause, notice what's happening in your body, say to yourself, gee, what am I experiencing? And again, if you have that desire to eat or buy something or whatever your thing is that you're using to self-soothe, and hopefully it's not hurting you, because then that would be in the addictive zone. Just maybe pause and notice and check in first before you do the thing. Okay, we love you. Talk to you later.